realizes the monster he created. Okay.
Well, guys, I got to tell you, I'm not surprised that we're here. You know, I think the
Candace Owens is such a nasty bitch. Also, Erica Kirk gets way too much shit for shit she didn't do. It's also ridiculous. So everyone's like, oh my God, she celebrated her husband's death. That literally didn't happen. That was a celebration of life parade that she was at, not the fucking funeral. And people conflate the two over and over and over again because they're intentionally being deceptive because they want everybody to believe that Erica Kirk hated her husband and that now she's fucking a black guy. Right? Because people hate Charlie Kirk because, I don't know, they think that he's racist when in reality he's not. He was a great man. He got assassinated for merely speaking his mind. Charlie Kirk was a great man. I stand on that.
writing's been on the wall, and really
I think it's actually an IQ check. If people think Charlie Kirk is bad, I think they're just retarded. Yep. I stand on that.
slowly seen Nick Fuentes, especially over the last couple of weeks, and especially as his feud with Sneeko and everything going on there continues to escalate. Slowly but surely, he's been toning down his rhetoric. He's been attempting to moderate and insert more nuance into his analysis, and clearly trying to steer it back to a more productive path. And it's really no surprise why this is happening. I think Nick Fuentes is finally realizing the ugly monster that he helped create. To the shock of many, it appears that Nick Fuentes is backtracking. Let me show you guys what's going on. We got
Yeah, Nick Fuentes did get a lot of attention for a lot of very, very entertaining monologues. Yeah, very, very, very good. Nobody can riff quite like Nick Fuentes, besides me. But yeah, no, he has said some very extreme stuff, some that I find very humorous that I assume to be in jest. But the problem is a lot of it was taken very seriously.
stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, so exactly like I said, we got a clip here going viral all over social media, which many people frankly can't even believe is real or is happening.
Okay.
Take a look at this.
What changed in 2024 and 2025 is it became really in vogue and really popular for people to talk about Jews in Israel in a negative way, also just to talk about conspiracies in general. Suddenly, that became the grift. And it attracted people that were looking for notoriety, people that were looking to build a social platform. How do we know this? Well, look at Jackson Hinkle. Jackson Hinkle, I think, gained like 3 million Twitter followers in 9 months. What explains the explosion in engagement for people criticizing Israel? No one's gonna like to hear this. You're gonna call me a grifter, you're gonna call me a shill, you're gonna say controlled opposition, switch sides. Honest to God truth, this is the truth. Probably it was being driven from foreign countries and the left. That's just true. Why, oh why, all of a sudden, did it become supercharged? If you criticize Israel on Twitter, boom, 100,000 likes.
It is very true. Now, I will say this. I thought the anti-Israel, anti-Jew shit was hilarious. I'm not gonna lie, it was so funny. But the problem is that people actually do believe that the Jews and Israels are responsible for everything wrong in this world. Don't get me wrong. I think the Jews have caused a lot of issues. I think Israel has caused a lot of issues. And one of the biggest things is censorship. It really seems like there's a lot of things that you can say about everything besides Israel. I've even had several videos demonetized due to me even mentioning Israel or the Jews. But the reality is, while they do cause issues, while they are not our greatest ally, they're not responsible for every shortcoming the earth has experienced. They're responsible for some, like brainwashing girls, and I think OnlyFans is a good idea. I stand on that. But not every issue on the internet is caused by the Jews.
You could literally...
It's overused now, I think. Yes, it is. And it causes infighting on the right, which we don't want to have. We want to have a unified front for change, to regress society back to normalcy rather than progress it into psychotic homosexuality.
Tweet Israel, 100,000 likes. Did everyone in America all of a sudden start hating Israel? Well, some people did, but I think it was driven in part, or maybe a lot, by the Muslim world, which is very engaged online because they were the ones at war with Israel, because Palestine is their regional cause. So I think a lot, like Jackson Hinkle, how many of his 3 million followers that he gained in those 9 months, how many of them came from the United States of America? And so suddenly anybody that wanted to blow up and be, you know, what's the hot topic? What's the woke take right now? What's the edgy take? What's the take that's gonna get me the most notoriety? It's on Israel. It's joining the Israel critical cause, you know, being a Jew conspiracy theorist. They were milking it for everything it was worth. Here's what I mean by this. If tweeting Israel critical sentiment gets them engagement and money, then like a mouse or a cat or any animal in one of these experiments, if they press a button and get a treat, they're trained that this is what they're going to do every single day. So if I'm an influencer on Twitter, how do I get my reward? How do I get my treat? I press the button every day. JFK said Hitler's spirit will rise from the grave. Israel. Jews did everything. And if we're not getting the same reward, press the button harder, press the button twice, press the button 12 times, slam the button. So it just got louder and louder. Oh, well, it started with, I think we should be able to criticize Israel. Then it turned into, Israel. Then it turned into, well, it's all Jews. Then it turns into, well, Hitler did nothing wrong. Then it turns into, Israel killed Charlie Kirk. Israel's behind ICE. Israel.
True. The part where it started getting into Charlie Kirk was killed by Israel is the part where I was like, okay, guys, not everything can be Israeli. Not everything can be Israeli. Now, I do think the anti-Israel sentiment actually did a lot of good for the world. It helps us be a lot more honest about events that occurred and how they occurred and how, not everything that was done was bad. Some things were justified, but a lot of things weren't. I believe that even the worst people can still be right in some regards. Like, for example, I think Hitler was a great painter. But I thought it was interesting because it allowed us to talk about things that formerly were taboo in a more open way. And I believe we should be allowed to discuss more things in a very open and honest way. It did cause a lot of issues, a lot of paranoia about Israelis and Jews, but I think it did cause some good clarity and some more deep diving into topics that have been masked for, hundreds of years. Like I thought the Berlin book burning was actually very straightforward. And then I realized there was a bit more nuance to it.
That's why we extradited Maduro. And I think that basically that is what happened.
What I think's going on here is that he's realizing, in essence, how counterintuitive all of his efforts and his entire movement has become due to a lot of the shock tactics that Nick Fuentes uses, a lot of the hyperbole that he engages in. He's kind of helped build this extreme and oversimplistic anti-Israeli view. And look, I don't live in his brain. I don't know exactly what he was thinking.
I also think it was good to be able to criticize for why is Israel our greatest ally when they do pretty much fuck all for us, right? And I think that's good, right? It also let us touch on a lot of edgier topics. I think the world has become a lot more edgy and a lot more interested in pursuing the truth. Because once you're told that you're being lied to, it will naturally pique your curiosity for, okay, well then what's the truth? But blindly accepting every conspiracy theory as fact, blindly accepting every single thing you hear on the internet as fact is always very dangerous. But it did weaponize a lot of retards, that's for sure.
Actually listen to him speak, especially when he's not engaging in the entertainment, persona that gets clipped up and shipped up on social media. When you listen to him do a sit-down interview, a long-form discussion, he tends to stick to more legitimate criticism of U.S. foreign policy. And
Chad is super dead. Yeah, I think it's because this is a very interesting, hard to talk about topic. And I think it's because a lot of people don't really know how they feel about this yet. So for this, I kind of understand why chat would be dead.
Neoconservatism. Do I agree with absolutely everything that he says? No, of course not. But he does make some valid points and some valid criticisms. But on the flip side, he's also engaged in some edgy shock value rhetoric. And for the most part, I think the kind of low-hanging fruit, low-brow stuff is mostly what proliferates online, more so than his more nuanced talking points. And I think that's the issue that he's realizing, is that the nuance has essentially been completely thrown out of the window. What might have started off as more legitimate, thoughtful analysis essentially devolved into complete brain-dead black and white narratives around my Jews, the Jews. And now we're at a point where a lot of his followers, whether he likes it or not, following, for instance, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the instant gut reaction is, well, it must have been Israel behind it. There has to be a deep state Israeli plot behind, it appears, literally every...
It's a really fun conspiracy theory to believe, but I think we can all agree, why the fuck are the Jews in charge of so much for the media and the news that's broadcast around the earth? It's a very valid question because there is so much truth to it. Why do the Jews have so much power?
And this has essentially opened the floodgates for two particular interest groups. First off, personally interested individuals, characters like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Megyn Kelly, Ian Carroll. They saw the massive recognition and attention that Nick Fuentes was getting online. Again, just speaking factually, whatever your personal views are of Nick Fuentes, not relevant.
It's not a conspiracy. They're literally running shit. Oh, no, Haven, I agree. They are running shit, but they're not running everything. And that's the issue, right? There's nuance to it. The problem is, including a person like yourself, you don't understand the nuance. They do have far more control then they should, but they don't have full control. And that's the problem, is when people don't understand, it's a critique on how much power they have versus people think they have a totality control over everything, our government, our news, our media, our food, everything. They have a lot of control, way more than I think they deserve, but they don't have full, total, complete control.
Here, the fact of the matter is, over the last 2 years, I don't think anybody can deny the meteoric rise of Nick Fuentes. He went from a rather fringe political commentator to essentially one of the biggest and most influential voices in the online political space, and this is despite the fact that he's banned from many social platforms. This is him existing purely within the ecosystem of alternative media. Despite the forces against him, he's still a force to be reckoned with, and I think a lot of people saw that, and well, you know, they wanted a piece of the pie. And of course, in comes the grift. When people realized that you could just say "my Jews" and then backtrack from there with the most illogical, twisted, manipulative nonsense, well, it's basically ripe for the picking. And so in comes a whole slew, a whole grifter class pushing all of these ridiculous conspiracies and scapegoat narratives. And then you've got the second crew, which I think amplifies the first, malign anti-Western foreign influence networks, mostly coming from the Islamic world, that saw the culture that was being created here as, again, ripe for the picking. Perfect to advance their worldview. And this is where I think Nick Fuentes is realizing that he has made a tragic mistake, especially as his whole public fallout with sneaky.
I think Nick Fuentes is a very smart guy, but I think he was sipping the Kool-Aid a little bit too much. And, you know, some people do get number drunk. They really do.
From Connecticut is playing out before all of us to see, otherwise known as Sneeko. Well, I think he's realizing that the culture that he helped create, well, it's kind of backfiring on his.
Yeah, Sneeko, the shit going on with Sneeko is just fucking out of control. It is. It's completely out of fucking control. It's embarrassing at this point. The whole fucking Muslim grift is just so lame.
Core mission statement now, isn't it? You know, since the beginning, his entire angle was that America was being manipulated into Israel's bidding. He had an interest in preserving the West, and the suggestion was that Israeli influence was attempting to undermine that, and not only that, but essentially influence American culture, American economic power, and military power to, quote, do its bidding. And I think that was especially true when it comes to Iran. That's the statement we always hear, that any action on the Iranian regime, it couldn't possibly be a justified act in the pursuit of American interests, but rather a spawn of Israeli lobbying and influence peddling to do their bidding in the Middle East. That's been the framing, that any aggressive posture towards Iran is evidence that we are controlled by a foreign power. But here's the counterintuitive part. By relentlessly pushing that narrative and radicalizing people into the extreme, you kind of end up on the flip side of the coin. By feeding into these narratives, you end up doing Iran's bidding, if you think about it. The entire Islamic world's bidding. The more you help push all of these brain-dead anti-Israel sentiments, this no-nuance black and white perspective on mud Jews, the more you play into their hands, you feed into the exact coalition.
I think that's a very fair point. I would like to say I do believe we are overstepping to what we would do for any other country that we're doing for Israel. I do believe we're doing too much for Israel. That being said, Iran clearly needed to be stopped. I mean, they were assassinating, what was it? 36,000 of their own citizens in 1 month. I think it was like January 2026. The Iran regime was overstepping and slaughtering 36,000 people of their own kind, as well as cutting off their internet to where they could not talk about their struggles at all. I think Israel is making us do far more than we should, as well as I do think Iran was a horrific place that did need to be stopped.
That Iran and its.
Trump said 50K recently. The numbers I have seen were somewhere between 36 and 38,000. Maybe Trump said 50K.
Little terrorist and Islamist world proxies have been trying to build for years. I like to call it the unholy alliance, an alliance of radical leftists.
But I am also of the firm belief where I don't give a fuck what any other country is doing. If it does not fuck with America, I don't care. If Iran was going down a path to where they would come onto our soil, I agree. We should blow them the fuck up very quickly. Obviously. And people need to understand that. Just because we're going to another country and doing something doesn't mean that can't serve America. Everything we as a people, everything we as a country should do should be to serve our nation first. And if that comes at going to another country and blowing them the fuck up because they're about to start going crazy, that still serves America in a sense.
World activists, Islamist sympathizers that need Israel to be painted as the boogeyman, and by extension, painting under that same red light the broader Western coalition and its interests. And just thinking about that particular.
They had been shouting death to America, so it makes sense to fuck them up. Very true.
Dynamic, well, you start to think what could possibly be more anti-American, antithetical to preserving the Western world and advancing its interests. And well, I think that realization has been made. And I gotta tell you, for someone like Nick, who's really, I mean, really painted himself in a certain light and decided to die on that hill, the fact that it appears he's willing to realize that he made a mistake, that it's all gone too far, I think that in essence does kind of paint a picture of redemption, an aura of authenticity. You know, it's not something we're seeing the most extreme grifters even entertain, but he is.
Yeah, you have to understand, Nick Fuentes walking the shit back is actually a huge W. It is. Because this shows he understands the boundary that he's caused and what momentum he set in motion, and he is trying to stop the damages that he has caused, even at the cost of his own career and his own audience. And I have a lot of respect for that. A lot of people shit on Nick Fuentes, but I actually think he's done a lot of good for this world. And I think he represents something very important, which is even when everybody is still silencing you, fighting and getting your voice out there. And I think he's done a lot of good. I think Rumble doesn't exist without Nick Fuentes. I don't.
And again, whether you like him or hate him, what's happening here is clearly a good thing. It's a move in the right direction, and I think some credit is due. Anyways, that's what I got. Thanks for watching.
I absolutely agree. Love Liberal Hive Mind, love Nick Fuentes, love Asmongold, great people. Yeah, hopefully more people will realize the money isn't worth jeopardizing your authenticity, and sometimes you do have to work against your audience to pursue the truth, because that's the only thing that matters. The truth is the only thing that matters, and the closer that we as people can get to it, the better.